CashFlow Diary Podcast, episode 465.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other CashFlow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because here's the thing. When it comes down to making business happen, oftentimes you can maybe feel like you lose your way, or maybe you don't know exactly what to do, or who knows. You know, in the back of your head, you're like, man, there's got to be a faster way to do this. Or what if I could just access someone else's knowledge, someone else's experience, someone who's been there? How on earth do I find someone who can help me take what I think is a great idea and make it bigger, better? That's a good question, right? Well, I think we're going to have some answers for you today because I have with me none other than Courtney Reum. You may know him from the company VEEV, or you may know him from the book Shortcut Your Startup, or you may know him soon from the company M13. We're going to be talking about all of those theory things today. Here's why. Because I know you're looking for a faster way to get things done. And I bet you probably have a core set of philosophies and beliefs that you would like to make sure are in line with what it is that you want to do. And more importantly, if I could introduce you to a person who could probably help you figure out how to have a consistent playbook that could lead you to your first 25 million in sales, well, I think you'd listen. So, with that being said, this is why you're going to make sure that you bookmark, that you listen, that you note, that you even share this with the entrepreneur you know needs to hear it. So let's get ready to listen and to learn from Courtney Reum. Courtney, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you could make the time because time is very precious to all entrepreneurs.
Yes, we like to say time is the new money. It is the scarcest resource and the one thing that we all have in common, no more, no less.
Indeed, indeed. Now, this being the first time that you're here, I got to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody else. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. I look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. You know, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, Hulk, etc. Because I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. Chief among them, as an entrepreneur, I can occasionally envision myself flying around town, saving my customers with our products and services, and often wearing a cape or tights. So, also like a superhero, an entrepreneur, though, has a beginning. You know, if you think about Spider-Man, for example, there was a time where Peter Parker was just going to school, doing his thing, trying to earn some extra money, take some photos, and then one day something special happens to him, and he realizes, I've got special abilities and I get to choose to use them for good or evil. So my question to you is as follows. Before VEEV, you know, that company that you were able to sell over to Luxco, before M13, before your book that you wrote with your brother, before everything that anyone knows you for today, what we want to know is, who is Courtney Reum?
Wow, you start with the tough ones. I think, first off, I kind of tend to believe that entrepreneurs are generally made, not born, although everyone has different set of traits. Some make it more likely that you'll be successful. But I grew up actually outside Chicago on a dirt road in a town of about 900 people, but I lived 10 or 15 minutes from, I think, what was the second biggest mall in Illinois. And about 30 minutes from there, I hit downtown Chicago. So I think I really had this amazing upbringing, besides having amazing parents and amazing family, where I got to have the best of both, meaning I was a bit country at times and then a bit city at other times. And I think it really just gave me kind of well-rounded and desire to be a somewhat of a Renaissance man from an early age.
Interesting. So would you still consider yourself a city mouse or a country mouse?
Well, I think, again, it's kind of both. And I think, it just depends on the time of your life. Right now, for what we're doing, and we're in the hustle and the grind and everything else, I think I have to be in a major city to accomplish most of that, at least some of the time. But I think I know what it's like to live where you can't see your closest neighbor. And I know what it's like to live with a bunch of roommates and hear everything going on above and below you. And so I think, adaptability has always been one of, if to borrow your word, has always been one of my superpowers. Nice. And so I think because I had that diverse upbringing, it allows me to be pretty flexible going between all those.
Got it. So now you guys have done a number of things that a lot of people hope to do. And chief among them, you started a company and then you sold the darn thing. So that's pretty impressive. So talk to us. How on earth let's just start with VEEV and let's start there. How do you go from growing up in a town of 900 people to VEEV?
Well, let's see. There are definitely a few things that happened in between there. For college, my parents said you can go anywhere you want, but you can't go to school in Illinois or a state that touches Illinois. So eliminate a few places, left
Wait,
a lot.
Hold on. They literally said you had to go somewhere. They wanted you gone?
Well, they wanted me to, do the proverbial broadening of the horizons. And so I think for all those same reasons that I just described, they were believers that they wanted me to get out and get exposure and have options. And so I was lucky in that I was a soccer player, a pretty good one, in that I had pretty much my choice of schools based on a combination of academics and soccer. And so because of that, they were careful that I didn't just take a soccer scholarship from someplace in Illinois and that I went elsewhere. So I ended up in New York City at Columbia, which was a great decision because you would have had to see me at 18, but I was 18 and looked about 15 and a half on a good day. So to show up in New York City, having never been to a bar in my life, having never really been in New York City until I went there for a recruiting visit, it was definitely lonely and overwhelming at first, but it makes you grow up really quickly. And so it was an incredible experience, and things kind of started from there.
Well, okay, so this sounds ironic already, never being in a bar, but VEEV does. Yeah. Do
I see where you're going with that. Yes. No. Well, there's some stops in between. I went to Columbia, did as you do when you don't know what you're going to do, and you're in New York City. So ended up in finance, doing the Wall Street thing. My brother and I my brother's my partner and everything, and so we were investment bankers at Goldman Sachs. And so the entrepreneurial juices, although I think always there, were kind of dormant until I worked on a couple quote unquote startup brands by Goldman Sachs standards. So I helped do the first deal for vitamin water, and then helped take Under Armour public. And for anyone that knows the Under Armour story, it's incredible. It's an incredible story, incredible growth story. And Kevin Plank, who is the founder, and guys like him were definitely, they weren't meant to be inspirations, but it just kind of happened where I was probably 24 and he was only 33 or 34. And so you see a guy who doesn't seem that much older than you, who has a good idea and just goes for it. And it sounds pretty crazy, but this is only a little over 10 years ago. Not one friend of mine left Goldman Sachs to do anything other than work for a hedge fund or private equity firm. So my brother and I, the one thing I will give us credit for is we were definitely at the tip of the spear in terms of saying, okay, we're going to leave something that was a pretty good gig at Goldman Sachs to do something like investment banking.
Yeah, and you kind of left just at the right time on that one.
True. Although, I'll never forget, I went to go get my teeth cleaned right after we had started VEEV and the financial crisis had hit, and the dentist said, "Oh, looks like this VEEV thing's doing really well, and you left Goldman at just the right time." I said, "Well, if I had any premonition or was that good at timing markets, do you think I'd really start an alcohol brand, or would I have done something else?" So, I think we had some good timing, but again, I would have shorted a bunch of things and done other things. People say people drink in good times and bad times, which is true, but I would have done it differently if I had any premonition. Totally understood.
But you do bring up something that's very, very interesting to me. There's two things, in fact. One, a lot of the paper asset guys that I've hung around before, that's kind of like what they do. and they think about starting a business, but they never actually do it. You did. So that suggests to me that there was a reason. What was the impetus to actually go out there and, I'll say, exercise your superpower with a company, let alone an alcohol brand? There's so many questions right there, man.
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of things to answer that question. One is that in terms of how or why VEEV, I had done a little work in the spirit space and honestly didn't know that much, but just found it to be a really interesting space in terms of how people innovate or don't innovate, and felt like if we could do something different as a product in the bottle and as a company, it would have a good shot. And so I wish I could say there was much more thought that went into it, but I was 26 at the time, and I went, you know what, starting an alcohol brand sure would be fun. And you learn all the other things that you don't learn at a Goldman Sachs on the branding and marketing side and all that stuff that I thought my brother and I could be inherently good at and that we would enjoy. And then, one thing kind of leads to another, but it was also a great time to be starting a business because I always say, had I have known then what I know now, I definitely wouldn't have started. And that's the case. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs say that about successful companies, ones that were a lot more successful than ours, because if you knew how hard it was going to be, you wouldn't do it. But we were starting at this time when people said, oh, did you have family in the alcohol bit? Because alcohol is the ultimate old boys network. And so to try to break into something where a lot of people's parents had done it, or my dad's dad did it, or something like that. I mean, we had none of that. And so it was just good old fashioned hustle and relationship building. But it was also a time when there wasn't access to as much stuff, but when I was starting, it was just Google, and more Google to figure out what we needed to know or how to get to someone. But it was just enough without. Today, I feel like sometimes there's just this inundation of information where there's just too much you can look up. And then I think what you were getting at is that you get the old analysis paralysis because you spent so much time researching it that you don't actually put, left foot in front of right foot and move forward.
Yeah. I mean, I found that to be very, very true, especially for those who've come from similar backgrounds that you have there. So I commend you for doing so. Now, when it comes down to it, you've not only started VEEV, but you was the intent from the beginning to eventually be acquired, or did that just kind of happen on the way?
Well, I mean, truth be told, I think that was the intention. And, now when we start companies, I think we're always, one of the first things we always ask ourselves or any company that we're working with is we want to really understand, is the plan to be acquired or not? In VEEV's case, as is the case with most things in spirits and adult beverage, I think you kind of have to be acquired because with very few exceptions like Tito's vodka or things like that, it's just hard to actually make money subscale unless you're, if you're Diageo or someone like that. Really good margins in alcohol. If you're almost anyone else, there aren't, and therefore the plan always had to be to sell versus be a going concern. Because even brands that have sold recently, a lot of people have probably seen something like Casamigos, that's not necessarily permanently profitable. So that kind of has to be the plan unless you amass a whole portfolio. So we were always starting it to sell it.
Got it. Totally understood. And having that exit strategy clear from the beginning is totally makes a lot of sense, makes decisions easier. Now, you said something just a second ago that I think is good, because you said when we start companies, as in you've done this now multiple times, and which gets me to believe that was part of the impetus for creating the book, Shortcut Your Startup. Yes?
Yes, correct. So we recently wrote a book called Shortcut Your Startup, and it was this idea that in the process of investing a bunch, starting a bunch of companies, joining boards and being advisors, we are at the precipice of this whole new world. And we really think for the next, decade, it's going to be like a golden age of consumer products in terms of creating brands. And so there is going to be the fill in the blank, the X for Y, the Warby Parker for this, the Uber of that. And it's all going to happen very fast. And we felt like we are uniquely positioned to be at the cutting edge of it, but we also felt like there's so many things that are different than were 10 or 20 years ago when starting a business that are kind of counterintuitive. And so we thought we'd write a book about some of those things that aren't necessarily intuitive, or just trying to help people who are starting something, for the first time. So we literally kind of go through a process of starting with our first chapter is called Get in the Trenches, and it literally finishes with a chapter on how to think about the exit, and then a bunch of different things in between.
So before we get further into the book, you just said something that I want to make sure I heard correctly. You said the golden age for creating brands. I've not heard that. So I'm curious as to what you see or what, because that says to me you've looked into the future, and based upon this future that you see, I'm going to change my actions or do this in the present. And I need to hear more about what that is.
Sure. And first, I always make the disclaimer that most of my good ideas didn't come from me. They came from something I heard or read. But as long as you hear and read a lot, that's okay. And as long as you give people credit. I definitely read that someplace. And I was like, yep, that's true. I wish I could remember where, so I don't. But I really believe it comes from a myriad of reasons. But one is that the cost and time to create something has come down massively. Therefore, everyone's doing it. We have a brand we work with that's called Chomps. It's kind of like an organic Slim Jim, started by a one-man show in Naples, Florida, and now we've got it to be in just a couple years the top-selling snack item in Trader Joe's. I mean, that barely ever happened in the past because all the big brands controlled shelves. But now, given how people can find capital, people can find resources, it's all been condensed. So the good news is it's a lot easier to start something than ever has been in the past. The bad news is it's a lot easier for everyone, whether it's a seasoned entrepreneur or first-time entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. So the competition has certainly never been fiercer. Therefore, I think it's the golden age of consumer brands because there are just a lot more brands if you look up the stats. And then the other part is that, whatever buzzword you want to use, like disruption, every industry is getting disrupted and you're seeing it, right? If you've ever thought to yourself, gosh, I wish there was a fill in the blank, chances are it's been done. And if not, someone's doing it. And if not, you should do it. But it's all happening, right before our eyes.
What I was thinking about when you were saying this is, I've thought a lot about the democratization of media and how the gatekeepers aren't there. I mean, you can just start a YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, build your audience, do your thing. You need nobody's permission. It sounds like you're saying that same thing is true for entrepreneurs who want to start something. How so, though? Because I'm not as familiar with, again, I've primarily played in real estate. That's like my thing, and or service related businesses. So the idea of actually making a physical product of some kind, and it's like, I didn't know that same effect was happening over there.
Sure. First, I'll just say you actually hit the other nail on the head, which is that starting a brand is one thing. I think the other reason we're living in the golden age of brands and consumer products brands is because we like to say it's the convergence of consumer brands, media, and tech. Put another way, every brand needs to be asking themselves, how can I be more of a media and tech company? How can I be more techable? And that's certainly happening because, as you just said, it used to be I start a brand and try and figure out how to market it. Now it's like I can start a brand, I can start my YouTube channel, I have a little following, I can amass some evangelists and a little word of mouth, and it's not going to get you to be a household name, but it's going to get the word out there among certain groups and certain people that might have affinity for your product. So to your question of kind of how you do it or why this is, I think the short answer is, and we have a bunch of specifics on it in our book, Shortcut Your Startup, but it's like you can start a product and prototype it. We call it the farmer's market version of your product. How easily can you kind of jimmy rig some version of your product to go out and test at a farmer's market, either literally or figuratively. And from there, I think let's say selling a product online, if I start a product, I get some consumer feedback, I think it's pretty good. It's not that hard to to get a Shopify page going, get something up there, and then start to either tell people about it or do some online marketing. And I think what's interesting is I heard Seth Godin, is one of my favorite marketers, say recently, it's not that hard to get your first 1,000 customers. He goes, I can get 1,000 people to buy just about anything, which is probably true when you just do the math on 1,000 customers divided by 300 and something million people in the US. The challenge and where brands are starting to struggle is once I get past my first X number of customers, whether it's 500, whether it's 1,000, whether it's 10,000, getting that next wave becomes a lot harder for various reasons and a lot more expensive. But it's not that hard to get, your first hundreds or thousands of customers. And so everyone can do it. And then you kind of start to see what products, fall out or rise to the top from there.
Got it. Yeah. Now let's talk for a second to the entrepreneur that's listening that is wanting to get started. I mean, maybe they're still in their, we'll call them their Goldman Sachs days. They're thinking, man, I should. They haven't yet. To them, that first 1,000 seems like an insurmountable mountain right now. Why would you say that? Why do you think he would say, or why would you say that first 1,000 or even that first one customer could be tremendously easier than we think? All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and I'm glad that you are enjoying what you are hearing thus far. But here's one of the things that's really important. One of the most important things that you can do is get started. One of the things that I've said before, and I say again, once you get started, stay started. But more importantly, there can be lots of roadblocks to getting started. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove one of those roadblocks for you and make it a little bit easier. Because the thing that I don't want to stop you is thinking, do I need a local number? How about a long distance number? Or should it be 800? How on earth am I going to make that happen so that people can contact me as I'm out there building my business, making my cash flow grow? But most importantly, understanding that it doesn't have to be difficult. Many of you may know, but if you don't, there's a company out there by the name of Grasshopper. And what I want you to do is I want you to go over to trygrasshopper.com/cashflow diary. Grasshopper is the entrepreneur's phone system. It works like a traditional phone system, but requires no hardware to purchase, no software to install. It's just the number that flat works. So if you are out there building that distributed workforce across many different locations, it's a way for you to still go out there and make your number be unified, simple, easy to use, something we've been using for quite some time. So again, go over to trygrasshopper.com/cashflow diary. Now, let's get back to the rest of the story.
Well, and again, I don't want to make it sound like it's easier than it is, because it's not. I just know it's pretty doable for anything. Put another way, let's say you're trying to find your first 10 customers. Mm-hmm. 5 years ago, it would be a lot harder to find your first customers. Now, mainly through online means, there's no way that you can't not find potential customers. Converting them is a whole nother thing, right. But they're out there, and you can do lots of screens, whether it's geo-targeting, psychographic, demographic, you can find them. Now, getting them to buy is a whole different thing. And if you don't get those first however many, every industry is different. Some people it would be 50 customers because maybe you're selling $1,000 mattress, so that's a lot. Maybe it needs to be 1,000 customers because you're selling a $2 keychain. Whatever it is, I can't tell you the number of customers. I can just tell you once you kind of have your number to go for. But I also think part of being an entrepreneur is failing fast and running a lot of these little experiments. So it's the hardest. I still find it to be the hardest thing to do, to cut an idea or a concept that I really like or really thought had legs. But you know what? If you can't find what your first number of customers, whether it's 10 or 1,000, then it probably either tells you that you need to change your processes as an entrepreneur, or the product just isn't viable. It's probably one of the two, but those are tough calls to make, but it's part of being an entrepreneur.
Got it. So let's take a step back for a second. How did you get the first customer for VEEV?
The first customer. Well, again, alcohol, and it was a great learning experience, because most of the things I think we're now really good at were not available to, like, in all the things we're talking about in terms of finding your tribe and converting customers, especially online, you couldn't do with alcohol. So all of our first customers came from physical retail or getting into bars, clubs, restaurants. So we found our first customer by going, okay, we've created a product that's super premium, that's organic, that's a better alternative to what's out there. Who do we think is going to drink this? It's going to be, a person at a trendier place in a major metro where these things start to, first adopters. So we kind of went for the high-end bars, clubs, and lounges.
Hold on 1 second, sir. You're doing this in the 2007 environment, though.
Yes, 2007 going to 2008. So yes, we launched it literally mere months before financial crisis hit. So our premise going in became different than our premise going out. But at that point, we had already launched a super premium vodka alternative. And so, I think there's also a difference between affordable luxury. I mean, we weren't selling $1,000 handbag. We were selling a $30 bottle of alcohol. And so whether your occasion was to celebrate or to drown your spirits, we felt like it was affordable to most people. But you're right. If I had to start it all over again, I'm not sure. If I'd started 6 months later, would I have started something that was a Grey Goose competitor? Probably not, given the climate.
Yeah. I mean, it did. I mean, as I'm thinking about it, I mean, there's like, when you say start a brand today, I can certainly go, well, clearly I've got to be on many of the social media platforms. I can grow the audience. I can do all those things. That part makes sense to me, but those were not tools and resources that you had, available to you. Like, how did you make it big? Like, how did people really get to know that this was, like, there had to be some linchpin or tipping point that occurred? I'm really curious to figure out how do you do that in a non-social media world?
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, and it's, it was literally kind of one bar stool at a time. We used to joke, first, especially when you don't have a direct to consumer or e-commerce option really available to you.
Right.
The only way to get your product out there, well, we can do all the marketing we want, but as I think an executive from Coke once famously said, put your product in danger of being purchased. I can have it at all these cool parties and I can have a billboard or I can do whatever. And then if someone goes to a bar and asks for it, consumers, I wouldn't say consumers are lazy by any means, but you also can't expect them to do the hard yards for you. So if somebody was like, yeah, I love that VEEV stuff, and I went to 3 bars and none of them have it, eventually you kind of get fatigue in terms of asking for it, right? So first thing is distribution, getting it in the right places so that, people used to say to us, oh, I feel like VEEV's everywhere. And it was far from everywhere. But among the demographics we targeted, we just had it at most of the better spots. And therefore, it felt like you were everywhere because 9 out of 10 places you went have it. But little did they know if they went 10 miles up the street, we probably had it at no places. Right. Now, okay, this experience of, we'll call it doing it the hard way, versus today, which is still hard, but yet I would say because of the way technology works, it allows us to reach other, demographics and just know our numbers a whole lot better and ROIs and whatnot. I know that you've had the fortune of helping, I believe, 6, 7, 8 other companies get to about $100 million. It sounds like you've got a plan, a playbook, or something that's actually working for you guys. What was the impetus behind helping other companies now? Like, you just got nothing to do? You want with your free time? Exactly. No, we felt like, you don't get a ton of chances to always pick your head up and see where things are going and do the proverbial put your hands behind your head and just see what kind of pattern recognition is out there. When we started, after we sold VEEV, we had one of those rare moments, and we used that moment to try to go, okay, we've invested in dozens of companies, we've been on boards, we've been co-founders or early advisors of other companies have done well. What are the commonalities we're seeing here? And again, for us, and I can only speak to what I know, most of our stuff is kind of consumer or tech based, and it's a lot of, I call it consumer tech, or people call it consumer internet. So things like Lyft, the ride sharing app. That's what I mean by consumer tech. Things that are, have a tech component but a consumer facing brand. And what we felt like we noticed or observed when we did that was, wow, there's just so much information out there. People are drowning in information. There's not a lack of information. There's a lack of ways to be the sieve and filter it. And there's a lack of for what we do, there was a lack of capturing that information in a way that's truly usable. So that's part of why we kind of tried to write Shortcut Your Startup as a bit of a playbook. But in terms of what we do with our current company, M13, we actually have created, we call it our playbook, but it's quite literally a digital repository of everything you can imagine, everything we can think of that we can capture in a way that's usable. So we've often gone, oh gosh, if brand A only knew what brand B knew and brand B only knew what brand C knew, there's so much information leakage there. Can we capture it so that when I get asked once a day, hey, do you have a good digital marketing agency you like? Which also is a tough question because it's got to be like, okay, do you know a good digital marketing agency who specializes in XYZ and maybe is in this location in this price range? But I can literally go to our playbook and based on whatever criteria the person asks, find a good, give them recommendations for a good digital marketing agency because we have hundreds of them in there, force ranked by different criteria. And if you think about it, if we're able to, of course, there's no one size fits all, but I think there's a lot more commonalities than a lot of people think, especially when, like I said, we're playing mostly in consumer tech. There's a lot more commonalities than you think. So now can I use this playbook of repeatable behaviors to actually create a platform to somewhat institutionalize or democratize the way in which we start companies? So rather than start one company and be the CEO of that, we've kind of said, hey, let's start a bunch of companies that we can grow, somewhat in tandem with a lot of synergy using our playbook approach. And that's been the goal, and that's what we've been doing. So we've been continuing to start our own brands, and then we've also, if you think about it, if our real secret sauce, our name M13 is derived from the brightest cluster of stars in the galaxy, whereby the sum of the whole shines brighter. The sum of the whole shines brighter than the individual parts, and so it's this idea of kind of connecting the dots and putting together strategies and the synergies between the companies. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to either start our own brands or take other people's brands that are pretty nascent, because our magic, we really think, is in this playbook approach. So if I can take someone else's brand who's got a great product, just doesn't know exactly what they're doing or hasn't done it before, and now super scale it, we think we're really onto something. So that's what we've been doing.
Okay. So for the entrepreneurs that are listening, if they wanted to, are you saying that, hey, if you think you got a brand that's worthy of our attention, call us?
Yeah, sure. Call, write.
Call, write, emails, Snap, Instagram. All right, so many choices.
Yes, if you literally just go to m13.co, not .com, .co, because .co's are trendy now, I'm hearing. M13.co, there's something there. You can reach out to us, or my email is just Courtney at m13.co. So we always like new ideas, but I will warn people that there's a difference between finding a product that's been manufactured, that found their first couple hundred customers and just doesn't know how to go from there, versus the person who comes to us with their idea on a cocktail napkin. I mean, part of it is, in the world we're living in, as we've discussed now, ideas continue to be cheap, even if they're good ideas, but the execution of them is really dear. So we never say never, but we tend to, if we're going to take on someone else's brand, it's got to be one that's seen a little bit of traction and we can super scale it, not something that we take from start to finish. Otherwise, we'd probably be doing it on our own.
Totally understood. And at the end of the day, it's good to have criteria, but it's also to let people know the realities of things at the end of the day. So having worked now with a lot of entrepreneurs, what would you say is the thing that gets in the way the most? Like, how can we help some of them get out of their own way to actually achieve some of the goals that they have set for themselves?
Oh, a lot of answers to that question. First ones that come to mind are, I think most people, especially early on when you're not quite comfortable in your skin as the founder, CEO, is they try to make the perfect decision at every point. And that's not really the game. I think this is a game, kind of like playing something like blackjack. You just have to make the best decision with the information available. Sometimes it'll be right, sometimes it'll be wrong, but all you can try and do is make the best decision thoughtfully, or maybe put another way, a good enough decision. And then clearly there's times where you have decisions that it has to be the absolute right, super thought out decision. But I think a pretty good decision made quickly is often better than a really good decision made slowly, except for the very few key inflection points. And so in this world of rapid brand creation, I've said it once, but I'll say it again. I really believe time is the new money. I don't want to diminish how it can be hard to raise money, but I think good entrepreneurs are finding money. So that, and once you get the hang of it, it's just a skill or a game like anything else. So having more money is not what's going to differentiate you, at least initially. time and speed to market and execution and getting out there, that is usually what will give you a leg up. So part of that is fast, but smart decision making.
So you said something, and I just want to kind of poke at it a little bit. Is it really that hard, though, to raise money right now?
Well, I'm sitting in the seat of, we have people throwing money at us on almost every idea, but I don't want to sound spoiled, because I certainly realize that we're fortunate. I think when I get out there and talk to people, and I try to have a balanced perspective, so I talk to people that have never started something and people who have started 5 things. Certainly the second and third time entrepreneurs, especially the ones that have a little success, can practically sneeze in a paper bag and they can raise money on that. That's what I believe. Now, I realize that's not most people, but all I can say when someone says to me, oh, you're just saying that from a position of whatever, which I am and I acknowledge, but all I know is that your ways to find money, even if it's not easy, are very different than they were, again, 5 or 10 years ago. Whether it's crowdfunding, whether it's different websites that do different things like that, whether it's just going, okay, if you want to find someone like me, you probably couldn't find me 10 years ago. Now, I'm not saying I'll respond, but you for sure have a way to get a hold of me. You can figure out my email besides the fact I just gave it out. It's not that hard. I can find Tim Cook's email. It's tim.cook@apple.com, right? Getting Tim Cook to reply is a whole nother ball of wax. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's easier because you have a lot more tools and accessibility and different means to find money than you did 10 years ago. So that I do stand by.
Yeah, totally understood. I get that. And there's a certain number of skill sets that are required there as well. And I'm sure from an previous investment banking perspective, you have a different, completely different perspective than most. Now, what would you say, what's it going to take for the entrepreneurs that are listening, maybe even for M13 themselves? What's it going to take to become relevant and, for lack of a better way of putting it, and survive in this new world that you see with this, with all of this golden age of brands?
Well, I would probably go back to what I said. If I had any superpower, if I had my closest ones, I think it's adaptability, right? When you look around, most of the biggest companies that have been built in the last 10 years, Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, Pinterest, they've been really adaptable, and they're actually built around 1 or 2 really key insights. And people don't think of it this way, but I think we use Twitch as one of the examples in our book. It's a company where it's now, it's a multi-billion-dollar company, and it's basically watching other people play video games. Now, I must be getting old here in my late 30s, because I'd rather play video games or do something else, not really watch other people do it. Turns out there's a huge market to watch people play video games while they were doing something else with a messaging app. They observed this, did the proverbial pivot, figured out their one key insight, and they've literally built a multi-billion-dollar business off it. And I could walk you through the same thing in the ride-sharing market and Airbnb. So I think it's key to really, look for those 1 or 2 key insights. Don't overcomplicate. A lot of these people want to find 4 or 5. No, 1 or 2 key insights is usually enough to build a big business. And then 2, you have to continue to be adaptable, because the world is changing fast enough. You look at a company like GE, that for not even, we're talking decades, maybe even a century, has been a fixture in the Dow Jones and atop every company's best run company list. Now, I believe they were just dropped from the Dow Jones. It was unthinkable 5 years ago. And so it's moving that fast. So even if you're on top of it now, I know you have to be ready to adapt and change pretty quickly. And we always joke, you don't have to know every latest and greatest. I just try to be 6 months ahead of most of the trends. And then when someone else finds a trend that I know today, 6 months from now, I'm on to something else. And so, as I say, the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed.
Yeah, totally like that. So for those that have been listening this far and they want to, find out more about what you guys got going on, maybe even pick up a copy of the book so they can shortcut some of their startup woes, what's going to be the best way for them to catch up with you guys? Like I said, I'm really easily findable on LinkedIn and our website, m13.co.
our page for our book is just Shortcut Your Startup. And the book is available in pretty much most places books are sold, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, you name it. And so if you're an entrepreneur and you can't find me, you have to really tune up your hustle there, because we're available and we're findable. So find me if you want.
Totally understood there. So, as we wind down here, a final question, if you will. I know that as people listen, or as we listen to things, oftentimes we can, reach what I like to call that point of decision. In fact, often someone listening could be standing in front of what I like to call, Courtney, the superhero outfit store. They are ready to go out there, put on their cape, grab their tights and make their thing happen. But like I know, that when we reach these moments of decisions, occasionally there's a companion, and that companion comes in the form of a voice. And that voice often reminds us of who we're not, why we're not. Are you really gonna? I mean, sure, you can try this, but no one's ever gonna respond to you. And for some people, they're even related to that voice. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend that the person listening is actually going to take action, and they're going to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours. They are going to make measurable progress. Courtney, what would you suggest that they do?
I think I just saw it's like the 25th anniversary of Nike's Just Do It. I mean, I don't think you ever go wrong by moving forward and doing something. And to invoke the book, we're lucky enough to do some things with Tony Robbins, who's on the cover of our book. And I think, he always talks about you are the one that can decide, right? I know it's hard because we're all surrounded by different influences, but I do believe that, you take something like confidence. No one should be able to steal your confidence. You let someone take your confidence if you lose that confidence. And so I think be confident. It's a little bit, I believe with starting brands, it's always better to have loved until lost than to have never tried to love at all. So try to love an idea and put something out there and see where it goes.
I love it. Jump in. That's great. Makes a lot of sense to me. I definitely want to say that I appreciate you guys going out there, making something happen, and to some degree, just doing it despite the environment, doing it because you can, doing it because it feels right, and most importantly, making it possible now for other people to follow in your footsteps by sharing that advice and wisdom, and making sure that the path gets easier. And really thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge, your insight, and your wisdom here with us today at the CashFlow Diary.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun, and appreciate all the questions.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? That means probably get over to shortcutyourstartup.com, or maybe contact him directly because you got his email, or who knows what idea you've got in the back of your head. It definitely means one thing, though. It's time to take some action. It's time to move one step closer to actually making that a reality, because, well, it's kind of never been easier, and you're the one with the idea. So go do it. The world is waiting to respond to you, and promise you, the marketplace will let you know. And what's exciting is that either you're going to learn or you're going to earn. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.